they really like dart along, like they really like, you know, jagger at you and stuff. I'm coming at you live from Gamescom 2023, where I am going to be discussing my hands-off preview impressions of a little game called Alan Wake 2. Now, why am I holding a thermo flask in my hand? Well, that's a very good question, but one that fans of the original 2010 cult classic will know that you literally had to go and collect like literally hundreds of these things, and that's where I want to start off my preview thoughts. So Remedy, the developer, has made no bones about the fact that this is a lot more survival horror compared to the sort of narrative, third-person, adventure-driven game of the first game, and you instantly feel that in the hands-off demo that I got to see. Now, obviously, I'm coming at you live from Gamescom, and it was part of opening night live that we got a look at the new trailer for Alan Wake 2, which was very Alan Wake-centric, which might sound a bit strange for a game called Alan Wake 2, but up until this point, most of the marketing focus has been on another character called Saga Anderson, an FBI agent working in the North Pacific to try and save Alan from the dark place in which he finds himself. But this demo, as well as the trailer that we saw for opening night live, was explicitly focused on Alan Wake himself. He's back in the driving seat. So the first thing to mention is just how drop-dead gorgeous this game is. It's coming PlayStation 5, Xbox Series and PC only, and the Northlight engine is really making itself work and literally putting in the hours, because a lot of this demo was focused on a chapter called Casey, so a single chapter from the game I got to see, and it featured Alan trapped within the dark place, which in his mind is reimagined as kind of like a warped version of New York, which is being plagued by a kind of shadowy type enemy known as the Fade Out, which are very reminiscent of the enemies from the first game, whereby you'd have to, you know, shine them with your torchlight at first before they would eventually appear in reality long enough for you to blast them away with a gun. Now, at this point in Alan's life, he has been trapped in the dark place for 13 years. He's got a big, great bushy beard, and he's a little bit erratic, trying to dig his way out with the help of Saga Anderson, of course. Didn't get to see so much of Saga Anderson this time around as part of the hands-on demo, but the demo that I saw, which was roughly around about 41 minutes, was very Alan-centric and featured Alan trailing the New York City streets, going in and out of subway, underpasses, all in the effort to kind of piece the story together and to kind of write himself out of the prison that he's created with himself. And one of the most impressive things of the demo that I saw is because obviously Alan Wake, he's this writer, right? He's kind of like a fiction novel writer, but in the first game it was kind of discussed about, oh, you're a famous writer and off you go with a gun and have fun. Whereas in this sequel, Remedy have done a much better job at integrating the writerness of Alan Wake. And what do I mean by that? Well, at certain points in the story and in the location, at least that I saw, of the dark place, New York, there will be instances where the way is blocked, the path is blocked, and sometimes you can use a kind of magic lamp weapon to kind of light the way and change the way light moves to reveal new places. But more often than not, in order to progress the story, you're going to have to match up certain scenes where things are blocked with certain clues that you found. So there might be an FBI agent dead, at which point you can go back to what's called your writer's room, head on over to something called the plot board, where you can very, you know, Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia style, pin the pieces together. Now, the Remedy were very clear in that there's only one solution to either of these, so you have to find the right pair in order to progress. But they did also make known of the fact that it's always worth revisiting, even if you try and fail, because Alan will always have something very unique to say about the situation that might give you a hint about how to progress elsewhere. Just going back to how beautiful the game is, there were points in this demo, because obviously Remedy games, they're kind of known for their ability to merge live action with in-game sort of, you know, CGI generated graphics, in-game footage. But there were points in this demo, and I think a lot of the heavy lifting here was the lighting, like a lot of dark greens, dark reds to kind of really impact the moodiness of the things that you're having to, you know, put yourself through and go around. But there were times where I couldn't tell what was live action in-game. You already saw from the trailer from opening night live, there's a sequence that occurs where Alan himself is being interviewed in a talk show, played by a host called, I believe, Mr. Door, by a famous British actor called David Harewood, which is very meta, very self-referential, and Alan Wake just kind of doesn't know. He's in a state of disrepair. He kind of doesn't know what to do or how to approach the situation. We got to see that full scene in its entirety before being dropped in the demo, and unsurprisingly, that state of mind for Alan only carries on when he's trailing the sort of mysterious New York City streets trying to find a way out. Now, I brought up the thermos flasks earlier at the beginning of this video, and the reason I did that is because Remedy have brought them back. So they were literally just a one-off sort of like nothing collectible in the first game, whereas now, in a kind of possible nod to the way other survival horror games like Resident Evil 2 remake, or maybe in the Resident Evil 4 remake does things, you'll collect these thermos flasks, and if you bring them to a save point, then you'll be able to save in different ways. So now they actually have a use. They're not just something that you're doing for an achievement or a trophy, they've actually got a purpose. Very early on in my demo, Alan Wake came across his own creation within the fictional world he creates in his books, a man by the name of Alex Casey, who's kind of this fictional detective, which is very cheekily played by Sam Lake, the real-life writer for both Alan Wake Control and then Alan Wake 2, all three of those games sitting within the same universe. And it just constantly keeps you guessing, because Alex Casey's taking issue with Alan Wake. Alan Wake is like, your creation, you're my creation, how am I able to see you? And then very quickly it became evident that, maybe very minor spoilers, Alex Casey, at least within the realm of Alan Wake's nightmarish Dark Place world, is in fact dead, and you've been chasing ghosts, and it's you meet him. It's all very melodramatic. The shadows are popping. It's so scary, especially when compared to the first game. Like, it really looks great. You turn the corner, and then there it is. Sam Lake, a real life guy, played Alex Casey, and his body is just strung up there. And that really dials into the whole unreliable narrator sort of approach that Remedy is hoping to continue with Alan Wake 2, that I think fans of the first game are really gonna love. Combat wise, it is really another case of just shining your torchlight as hard as you can at enemies and then blasting them away once you bring them into the reality, which felt really satisfying and gratifying to do in the original game as well. So I'm kind of glad that they haven't got rid of that here, because there'd be that moment of tension where you're like, am I, the enemy's coming at you and you're shining the torch and you're wondering if you've got enough time between when the enemy will approach you fully. And in this game, they really like dart along, like they really like, jagger at you and stuff. And then, if you do reach them in time, then you're able to blast them away with the shots of your pistol, which, at least in the scenario that I saw, Alan Wake was only able to retrieve thanks to picking it up from the dead body of Alex Casey. The story is all very sort of interconnected, in case you didn't in case you can't already guess. I have trouble keeping track of it myself, but Sam Lake was there. He did a Q&A after the demo, and he was very explicit to mention that this is a game that you can play standalone. You don't need to have played Alan Wake, you don't need to have played Control. If you do happen to play those games, there will be some nice cameos, some nice nods, but this is very much a singular narrative. And I think the inclusion of Saga Anderson as a totally new playable character only feeds into that. Inspiration-wise, he mentioned all of the hits in terms of like folk horror. We got Midsommar, Hereditary, the first season of True Detective, Hannibal, and of course the Resident Evil series. There wasn't too much of the folk horror side, even though murder cults were mentioned in some of the dialogue between what I was able to see as part of the demo, but I'm excited to dig in more to that side, because of course, after the very early sequences of the game, at any point once the game releases Alan Wake 2, you'll be able to jump between Saga Anderson and Alan Wake at will and kind of like control how far along you want to push the other one's stories before finding out what's going on the other side of the equation as well. So Alan Wake 2, lots to love. It quite possibly might be, in fact, who am I kidding? It definitely is another Game of the Year contender in a year already full of great games. It looks great. It's totally my vibe in terms of that being that story-driven, horror-centric shooter game, the kind we don't get enough of anymore. So I'm really excited to learn more about Alan Wake 2. I was excited to sit back there in the theater, 41 minutes of untouched gameplay and just letting it wash over me. It's really good stuff. But anyway, guys, those are my thoughts of my hands-off impressions. Unfortunately, didn't get to play it, of Alan Wake 2, which was running on a PC, a little bit glitchy, a couple of duplicated NPC character models, but other than that, it was looking pretty golden, because obviously it releases in October. There's not too much longer to wait, but every game comes out in October, and Alan Wake 2 is one of them. I will most certainly be making time for it, especially after seeing the demo.